Hi everyone, welcome to another video and I hope you're doing well. I'm Vache from Recording Studio 9 and let's get on with today's video. Now I'm going to assume from the title of this video you are interested in audio patch bays for your home recording studio. And in this video I'm going to try to help you to decide whether you need an audio patch bay or not. Before we decide whether we need a patch bay or not, the first thing we need to do is know what a patch bay is. This is a common patch bay. It's got 48 sockets at the front, 48 sockets at the back. They interconnected inside, and you connect all your outboard gear and audio interface and everything else to the back. And from the front, you can use patch leads, like these things, to interconnect them together. But there's more to it than that. So if you want to learn in detail what a patch bay is and how it works, I do have several videos, so I will put a card up here somewhere and I will leave a link in the description on all of those videos so you can watch them first and then you can come back and continue, because I'll still be here. This video will still be here. So if you don't know about patch bays and you want to learn how they work, because that is important, go and watch those videos and I'll wait for you here. And what's an outboard gear, you may ask? Well, something like this. This is a very simple 2-channel compressor and gate that can be useful as an outboard gear. So this is an analog processing unit. There are various types of outboard gear. Apart from compressors, there are equalizers, DSP processors, as well as effects like reverb, delay, and so on. They just bring some of that analog feel and touch, because you can touch the knobs, into your mixing workflow, as well as the analog warmth and sound into your audio. So the patch bay allows you to connect all those outboard gear into your audio interface, into your DAW, and you can interconnect them very easily. So, first question. Do you need an audio patch bay for your home studio? Well, before we answer that question, there are a few other questions that we need to ask ourselves. The first thing is, do we have an outboard gear in the first place? Are we planning to buy one, or we already have one? Or before we answer that one, there's another question we need to ask. If we do have an outboard gear, like a compressor or a mic preamp we want to use, how many do we have? Is it just one? Or are we planning to buy more? That is another question we really need to ask before we answer the first question, if we need an audio patch bay. Let's assume that we only have one outboard gear. Well, the answer to that would be, depending on whether we are planning to add more in the future, then if it's just one, possibly not. Because the patch bay is only useful if you are trying to interconnect multiple gear, multiple outboard gear. So in that case, maybe not. Okay, so unless you're planning for more gear in the future, then you can always add an audio patch bay when you get, I'll say my personal opinion would be at least 3 before you purchase an audio patch bay, so that you can interconnect them together. But hang on. Even if we have one outboard gear, or we're planning to buy one because we like the analog feel into our sound, we have to ask another important question, even more important than our outboard gear, is, do we have the audio interface that is capable of interconnecting our outboard gear? It needs to have enough outputs and inputs so that we can send the signal from our DAW and then receive it back and then process it and continue in our DAW. Basically what happens is just like when you put a plug-in in your channel, like a compressor plug-in, it's very similar adding an outboard gear. A little bit more involved, but very similar concept is that instead of putting a plug-in and the compression happening software, we are sending the signal out of your audio interface into the compressor and comes back and then continues on to the channel, to the next plugin in the plugin chain. So what kind of audio interface you have? If you're just starting out and you have a small audio interface which has 2 inputs and 2 outputs, well, the 2 outputs will go to your speakers. You need to hear it. That means you don't have any outputs left to send the signal out to. So you need at least 4 outputs and 4 inputs on your audio interface before you even think about outboard gear. Makes sense, yeah? So the question now is, do I need a patch bay? It really depends on whether you have the more important item in your studio is an audio interface that can support and cater for additional inputs and outputs. Now, there are many audio interfaces out there, budget-wise, and mid-range and high-end, of course. So I'm going to concentrate more on the budget ones. And there's one that I would highly recommend personally. Unfortunately, it's no longer manufactured. It is the Behringer's FCA Firepower 1616. Now, that had 8 inputs on board plus an ADAT. So you could have 16 input, 16 output. And I've done a whole series of videos on that product when it was still available. You might be able to find maybe secondhand, because that's my highly recommended if you are starting out. There are few features on that audio interface that allows you to use outboard gear also on the way in, because 8 of its analog inputs also have insert point. So you can use your patch bay to connect to the audio interface and with the inserts in there. And then if you have 1 or 2 compressors, you can use them to record on the way in. So the sound of the compression is already included when you are recording in your DAW. And later on, you can use the patch bay to switch and use those compression with different settings for your, let's say, drums bus or your vocal bus or mix bus and so on. So I highly recommend to watch those series of videos. I will leave a link up there and in the description as well. So watch them. And now the next question is, now that those interfaces are no longer available, the next closest one from Behringer is the Euphoria UMC 404 HD. It has 4 inputs, 4 outputs, MIDI, as well as 4 inserts on 4 of its channels. So that's my next highly recommended starting up budget audio interface for your home recording studio. I think they're probably under $300, and that's all you need to start with. But I digress. We still need to answer the question, do we need an audio patch bay? And as you can see, that to answer that question, it really comes down to our audio interface. Find out if your audio interface can support input and output multiple, and then how many output gear you're gonna have. If it's just one, then you can physically plug in the inputs and the outputs to the audio interface and send the signal directly to those outputs and return the inputs. And once you start getting more than 2 or 3, then I would recommend a patch bay. So that way you're not going to the back of your unit, like in my case, back of my console, very hard to rewire things all the time. So patch bay becomes really handy to quickly switch the inputs and the outputs of different processors to my inputs and outputs of my audio interface. Now that's one scenario of the patch bay use. Another scenario would be if you have lots of synthesizers or sound modules and you want to connect to your either mixer or your audio interface, but you don't have enough inputs. So instead of constantly connecting and disconnecting those synthesizer module outputs into your audio interface, you can use the patch bay to patch them through. And at the same time, you can use, let's say, outboard gear, let's say from a synthesizer to a compressor, because remember, they are line level, and the output of the compressor to go into your mixer audio interface. So in that scenario, your audio patch bay may be something that you can use to utilize and make your workflow much easier, because that is the whole idea of the patch bay, to make your workflow easy so you can interconnect all your devices. Well, I hope that answered your question if you need an audio patch bay or not, and I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure you give me the like, and if you like videos like this and topics like this, feel free to subscribe to my channel. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great time making music, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheerio, guys.